and welcome into the Who's On podcast, part of the Sabre Podcast Network, and welcome in to the college football season. Week 0 has arrived. I've got a lot coming up today on the podcast. We preview this NC State season opener that is not in Brazil, and it is an ACC game, and it is at Scott Stadium on Saturday against the NC State Wolfpack. I've got the Wolfpackers' Noah Fleischman joining me later on to preview this game, get a little bit more deeper into the NC State side of things, and kind of spoiler alert, they're in a very similar boat to Virginia as far as a lot of new faces over there for the Wolfpack too. But of course, I got the usual Kris Wright from the Sabre joining me here today. Just as we got a nice little facelift over on the website this week. So if you haven't been up there, check that out. The Sabre.com got a little glow up this offseason, Kris.
Yeah, full update back to the Sabre.com as our URL. That's the coolest part about it, I think. We've been around since Tiki Barber for Heisman was a splash page that Mike Ingalls, who founded our site, did all those years ago, and we're still here. So it's been almost that long since NC State's been here in Charlottesville, though. Not quite that long, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, I know we're talking like I think you said it was 2006 the last time they beat them in Scott Stadium in Charlottesville, and it's like they just haven't played that often. And they played a few years ago with Brennan Armstrong's triumphant return to Charlottesville, and of course, that game will be remembered for Anthony Calandria losing his helmet after the play and striking a pose. And then you also have got like the retake on the field goal. These two teams haven't played each other, but the last two games between these two teams have been, really competitive and come down to the very end.
It feels like these games are like that a lot when it's these two teams, or at least from my memory. Those are the ones I remember the most. I don't remember either team really running away with it very much. Obviously, last year's matchup was really competitive. Interception in the end zone to end it for Virginia. But Tony Elliott has said last week that that's when they found out what they had in last year's team, was how they responded to that loss. So here we go again.
Here we go again. All right, we're gonna break down some initial reactions to the first UVA depth chart of the year that was released today. We'll also get into some takeaways from Tony Elliott's press conference before we get into a deeper dive with Noah Fleischman jumping up. But Kris, first, let's start with the depth chart, and I think I want to pat us on the back. If you've been following what we've been talking about over at the Sabre.com, and if you've been following the Who's On podcast and everything, I think this is depth chart pretty much played out to kind of what we were talking about throughout fall camp. I think one of the big, first thing your eyes see the depth chart, your eyes, for me at least, immediately went to wide receiver. What do they do with that? That was kind of the biggest mystery because we just don't know. And so at the X receiver, they've got Rico Flores as the starter, but also an or with Tyler Coleman, this guy that's been in the program for a long time. And so he's been battling with Rico, who's been hurt during fall camp. So that's part of the reason that one's so tight. And then you've got in the slot Cam Courtney, one of the few returners in this receiver room. He's listed as the starter, Josiah Abdullah, Tyson Davis behind him. And then Jaquan Gibson, who I think has kind of he seems like the guy that's separated the most. He's also been the most available throughout fall camp, starting at the Z, Deshaun Martin, Day Martin, as they call him, right behind Gibson there. And then a couple freshmen on the here too. Actually, the only true freshman on the depth chart. I'm just taking one more last glance to make sure that's right. Dylan Cope and Jack Rhodes, the only two freshmen, which is interesting because Tony Elliott said, there's so much experience as we look at all the 5th, 6th, 7th year guys on this roster that you probably won't see a lot of first years. But Jack Rhodes and Dylan Cope are two of the guys that have stood out in camp. So what's your reaction to these receivers?
The easier spot to break in as a freshman would probably be receiver because you don't have to play all 80 snaps or 70 snaps or whatever. You'll play some snaps. If you had told 2006, right, the last time Virginia beat NC State in Scott Stadium, that there would be more 7th years on the first season depth chart than first years, people would have looked at you cross-eyed and it's a 7th year wasn't a thing. I don't think. Maybe there were a handful back then, but
yeah, probably 2019 they would have looked like you like that.
Right. So 6th, 7th years on this depth chart, but And I know 6'7" is dead, so I won't make the joke. But the as far as receiver goes, I think the interesting part is there aren't that many ors. I thought we would see or, but there are a lot of names there. Whether you put or on there, it doesn't really matter. There are a lot of receiver names listed, and that's what we've anticipated is that they're going to play six in any year. They're going to roll a lot. It just feels like a year they're going to roll a little bit more than that, maybe as many as 10 in a game. So, the freshmen are certainly interesting. Jack Rhodes in particular got a mention in a Jeff White article recently. His nickname is apparently Blackjack because you can bet on him. That was a nugget from Coach Mem. So, and of course, Dylan Cope's had a lot of praise since the spring as true freshman. But there's a lot of kind of mix here between transfers, in-house development. You got a Josiah Abdullah still in there. Isaiah Robinson's not, but he's coming off an injury. So, there's some guys who have been here, Tyler Coleman, who you mentioned, that are also in that mix. And again, I think I don't know if I said it to you or to someone else on one of these interviews recently. The most interesting thing about receiver to me is I can't tell if they're being coy when they say, oh, somebody will rise to the top. We don't know what we have. If they're kind of like, they do know and they're not telling us. Or is it really sort of, we don't know. And it's going to come down to real game action to figure it out.
Yeah. Another note, Dylan Newton Short, he will miss this first game against NC State with an injury. Tony Elliott said that in his press conference today. I think he would be on this depth chart if he was healthy, but he'll miss the first game. Yeah, I'm in the middle too. I can't decide if they're being a little coy about this. I remember Adam Mims in the preseason when I was like, you don't have a Malachi Fields or a Trell Harris or a Malik Washington, and he made the point like, well, like I would fight back against that because we didn't know that we had those guys when we had those guys, and to some extent, that's true and not, but yeah, I think we've heard a lot of good things about Gibson. I think when Flores has been out there this fall, I think coaches have liked him. And then I still like, I know he's not as listed as a starter, but I'm still very interested in Day Martin because he seems like a guy that just kind of has been fighting a hamstring injury. But like Tony Elliott has brought his name up multiple times. And I don't think that's by a happen chance. So I expect he'll be a guy that we see out there because he just kind of brings a different skill set to the receiver position. So yeah, I mean that's
Jaquan Gibson might be your Malik Washington type. And I don't mean those numbers, but I mean someone who catches, multiple
yeah.
balls, catches multiple times in a game versus maybe some of the others might end up being bigger numbers in terms of touchdowns or yards per catch, that sort of thing. But Gibson has given me the vibe, the way they talk about him, that he's going to get targets and get a lot of opportunities to make catches, just because he's high motor, runs good routes, experienced. So I feel like those things signal to you that, hey, here's a guy who's at least going to be a possession type receiver and get a lot of touches.
He's also built pretty well for he's sub 6 foot, but he's 196 listed. And like you could see him out of practice, he looks pretty strong out there. So that's like kind of and he's playing the same position. I think, yeah, playing the same position as Trell Harris last year, who they used in a couple different ways. They'll give Trell some screen passes, see if he could spring a run off or something like that. So I like that call there. The other thing on offense that I looked at is at running back, Shaquille Middlebrooks, the starter. Surprise everyone! The guy that they've been talking about since spring is the guy that's the starter. But then it's Zay Davis or Xavier Brown or Peyton Lewis or Noah Vaughn. A lot of ors there at the running back position. And Tony Elliott said, yeah, like any of them could go out there and play on Saturday. We'll see. I don't know how they divvy that up, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, a question on the message board was, would we see two running backs in the game at the same time? And I know that came up earlier in the preseason, and Coach Kitchens, I think it was, said, yeah, maybe. It's something we'll look at. So I think there are going to be some situations where more than one of those guys is in the game, right? There are a lot of different ways you can slot your personnel packages to use what you have. I think I referenced at some point in the preseason the sort of pop pass stuff they do.
Yeah.
At times they've done that to a receiver in motion. What if you put a running back out there and pop pass it to him instead? Or what if you put a running back in the backfield, motion him out, and then bring him back for a pop pass, right? So there could be some ways to use running backs that aren't as simple as you're the only one. It's pistol formation. We're going to hand you the football. I think there's some versatility here that will dictate how we see these guys use some.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see just kind of how that rotation splits up. I think Middlebrook will get the heavier load of the bunch, obviously, but then from there, like even Zay Davis, Tony Elliott mentioned him first today, and I don't think there's any rhyme or reason to why it's listed in the Zay Davis, Xavier Brown, Peyton Lewis, Noah Vaughn. I don't think there's any reason it's listed that way, but he did say that everything they're throwing at him as a second year player, he's done this fall. Defensively. There's a lot of guys at edge that we've talked about, but it's kind of interesting how they have them listed. Fisher Kamak obviously listed as starter defensive end, no shocker there. But Nana Nyanwu is a guy that we haven't talked a lot about this fall, but he's a guy that I think they were really excited about back in the spring. And he's listed as the backup to Kamak. Billy Kadelka, it was everyone's favorite guy to talk about last year in the preseason, and we barely talked about him this preseason, but he's there again as the third guy listed. Then on the other side, Matthew Fobbs White, now healthy, and then Devin Baxter and Jewett Hayes, two guys that have gotten a lot of reps this fall camp that coaches seem excited about. So there's some depth there, and then like guys like Justin Townsend and Ezekiel Larry. Yeah, some other guys that aren't listed here that could get some play time. Ezekiel Larry is coming back from an injury, so he's still early. But yeah, it'll be an interesting
Elliott said
rotation
he's a
there.
little ahead of schedule.
Yeah,
So they knew they weren't going to have him from the opener. At one point, they were thinking maybe October, but it
yeah,
sounds like he's ahead of schedule. So maybe they see him before October. Ezekiel Larry had a foot surgery, if I recall correctly. So we'll see there. But you know my rants on depth charts. Longtime followers of the Sabre know that I kind of roll my eyes at depth chart because this is the base package that we're talking about.
yeah,
And we know for a fact on defense, they're not going to be in the base package all the time. That's not what Coach Rodzinski does. They had a NASCAR package last year, super speed rusher package, whatever. So I think what this tells us is there are six different end types that
yeah,
they have confidence in, and there might be some others that emerge like a Daniel Rickert type that, in game one you didn't expect it, but by game five it was like that dude might be the key to the whole defense because you can put him wherever. So we'll see. My stance on this started all the way back at Rodney McLeod, who's been a guest on your show here.
yeah.
He was not on the first depth chart of the season as a true freshman, if I recall correctly. This is my memory of it. And by game like five, he was a major contributor on defense. And since then, I've been like, man, depth chart doesn't mean anything. Like Rodney McLeod wasn't even on the depth chart. And then he went and played in the NFL for 13 years, so or 15 years, whatever how long he was in the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, it was just last week. Elliott made the comparison with Justin Townsend to Daniel Rickert as kind of having some of those kind of pass rushing chops. So like he's not listed right now, but it's totally feasible that he gets some playing time. And you mentioned the different formations. We know on third down, they feel like they have this pass rushing, package. That's the one thing we don't know, like what that's going to look like when they get out there. Um, they like to move some defensive ends into defensive tackle and kind of get them lined up in different areas and stuff. So it'll be fascinating to see how that plays out. Last thing on the depth chart, unless you had anything else, was the kick returner, punt returner situation. I know that was something that they were toying around with, and in light of recent news, which we'll talk about in just a second, they have a little bit more of a need for an answer there. But Jaquan Gibson listed as the starter at kick return with Noah Vaughn behind him, and then Josiah Abdullah as the starting punt returner. I I think all you could hope for, and this is something they got last year with Cam Ross, is just a guy that can catch the ball and not turn it over.
Especially on punt returns. So
Yeah.
that was the one that Coach Gaither was a little bit unsure of a couple weeks ago. Sounds like Abdullah won out over the course of time here, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see multiple guys
Yeah.
get chances at punts. Not in week zero, game one, but over the course of multiple games, you might see different guys get a chance at punt return depending on how it looks.
Yeah, they usually have like 5, 6 guys warming up doing that pregame, so it wouldn't be surprising at all. Um, Tony Elliott had his first press conference of the season. It's also the first time that we've got to talk to him since the news last week that running back Solomon Beebe had a few charges of animal cruelty. He's obviously, we'll wait to see kind of, alleged animal cruelty. We'll see how that plays out in the court system and everything. But Tony Elliott said today that he was suspended indefinitely, but he is still part of the team. Um, Obviously, BB was expected to be part of the running back rotation. He was expected to maybe get some snaps at wide receiver, like you're mentioning earlier. And then also he was going to be the starting kick returner. That was the biggest plus that he gave to this team. And now, I'm not going to get into the logistics of everything and, talking about this any deeper, but, at least for now, he will not be playing.
Yeah, certainly not in week 0. So some of that just depends on how long it takes stuff to play out. The guy that surprised me down there, though, was Noah Vaughn. I know he's done it before, but I was not anticipating him being on the depth chart at kickoff return.
Yeah.
I thought someone else would be there, maybe a Peyton Lewis or even a Deshaun Martin, who you mentioned, who has a little bit of a background in it. So to see
Yeah.
Noah Vaughn there is interesting because you hear how much the coaches like him, how much they trust him, how much he's earned, right? Like battling through high school injury and then early career injury and then last year's injury. So there's obviously some culture sort of things that Noah Vaughn brings to the table. But at that spot specifically, I thought it was interesting to see him down there.
Yeah, Xavier Brown's done that in the past too. So, yeah, interested to see how that played out. Injury wise, Cam Robinson likely a game time decision. I think we all knew it was probably going to end up with this game time decision designation. We'll see when the official injury reports come out later this week, but that just feels about right. He just came back to practice, I think at the like full go at practice last week, and he's been full go at practice this week. And I think Tony Elliott's words were, he's ahead of schedule, or he's going ahead of schedule right now. So we'll see if he's out there Saturday in full uniform, ready to go. I've said this throughout that Virginia likes to take these things a little bit more conservatively. So we'll still have to wait and see what it looks like. But obviously, he's listed as the starter. Again, like you've said before, take depth charts with a grain of salt. This is sometimes with injuries too. It's just like ideally, if he was healthy, yeah, he'd be the starter.
Yeah, I mean, I've expected him to play since the spring. So until he's not out there, I'm just operating under that assumption. Kids make it back now so fast from ACLs. So I'm sure physically, if he was cleared for contact last week, that he's ready physically. The question
Yeah.
will be mentally, how comfortable is he at full speed, flying in and hitting someone when he hasn't done that as much for months and months and months and months, maybe a little bit here at the back end of preseason practice. So we'll see. But listen, the guy's a freak athlete. He's experienced. And he's a big time playmaker. So I expect he'll be ready to go.
Yeah, and I think that's what they'll be looking at this week. Tony Elliott said that they're going to use these next big couple days as days to evaluate being in contact now, and so we'll see once we get to Saturday. But obviously, that's going to be the thing that both Virginia and NC State fans will be watching, because there's maybe only one other guy on either side that could probably make as big of an impact as Cam Robinson can when he's out there. The other big injury thing, and it's one that we really haven't talked a lot about during fall camp, is Corey Costner, because the coaches are very high on Corey Costner and how he finished last year. He was really good at that spur spot. He's listed as the one of the backups for Donovan Platt right now. He's a guy that Tony Elliott said is just coming back into practice now, and so we'll see what his situation's like. But we hadn't gotten a whole lot of updates on Corey Costner throughout fall camp. But I think he's a
Other than
guy
he's been
that,
wearing a precautionary jersey the few times we get to see practice.
yeah, I think he's a key guy that we've overlooked, but we really shouldn't, because I think he could play a key role this year when he's healthy.
I think so too. I like Platt at that spot. He practiced there all spring. He's got the makeup to be in the box, coming from Service Academy previously, right? Just, I don't know. He gives you the vibe of someone who could play anywhere. Coach Rodzinski said, I can put him anywhere. So they kind of treat him that way. But I think that's a good option to have in that spot while Costner gets back up to speed. And then I believe Jalen Jones is the other one listed there as the or. He's got a
Yep.
lot of experience coming in as a transfer too. So, that spot looks like it's in pretty good shape. And listen, I guess we could say that about a lot of spots on the depth chart. Like, because you
Yeah.
look at multiple names and go, well, I'd probably be okay if that guy was in there. I don't know that Virginia is used to that yet, right? Like there have been plenty of years where I ran across an old defensive line article that I wrote maybe 20 years ago, and that was talking about how only 7 people or something like that were listed at defensive line total on the whole roster. And I was like, what? I had to like go back and check my notes, and I was like, what in the world am I writing about?
Yeah, it
This team is not that. There are a lot of guys capable at a lot of spots.
Yeah, it feels like they don't have enough room on the depth chart to list all the guys that could be on the depth chart. Like it feels like there's like could be an extended list of this depth chart that keeps going out. Where in years past you're like like I guess we'll have to put this guy in multiple positions because we don't want to put anyone else on the depth chart. Like looking at the offensive line those first couple years under Tony Elliott, but yeah, I'll be interested to see when Costner gets back to full health. But I have, if you've listened to the season preview podcast with Greg and Jackie, I had Donovan Platt as my interceptions leader with an asterisk. If Corey Costner gets back to full health, I could also see him being the interception leader. I think both those guys could have good years. As far as other housekeeping measures, you'll notice there's no Kazim Moore or Jacob Holmes on this depth chart because as with this whole month of August, we just keep getting different lawsuit here, injunction here, like lawyer here, court here, judge here. Like it's just been maddening just to keep up with. And it seems like general manager Justin Sparrows is taking the reins on that, so Tony Elliott doesn't have to worry about getting his pre-law degree at UVA while he's at it. But as of right now, Kazim Moore, Jacob Holmes will not be available for this Saturday. And Tony Elliott said that both those guys want to play college football. I guess they'll just determine if they go. I don't know what their next step will be, but I was about to I guess like as a lawyer, but I'm not a lawyer. Maybe I should call a lawyer.
It would require, from what I understand, and this stuff is complicated, a state judge injunction versus the one that was sort of a blanket injunction. Now it requires state specific. Beyond that, I can't really tell you a whole lot. I will say this, Jacob Holmes would help at defensive tackle. He played really, really well last year. If he's available, he would help that position. Kazim Moore gave you a swing player that could play inside or out. We talked about the speed package. He was inside on the speed package last year. So those guys would give you options, right? But this roster has a lot of options, just not that have proven it. Now, at this time last year, neither one of those guys had proven it either.
Sure.
So we'll have to see. But no, I don't anticipate them being there week 0. And then it's a little while before, you play again because there's the bye week in between. So I guess we'll all wait and see what the latest NCAA or court ruling or whatever, because the other half of this, and these guys doesn't apply, but there are some schools trying to get guys coming back from the NFL draft. Now some of the power conferences are coming out and saying, if you declared and didn't withdraw, our conference is not going to let you play. The ACC is one of those.
Yeah.
Big Ten is one of those. So yeah, who knows? Who knows who's going to be on these rosters?
Yeah, it's crazy right now, and I liked how Tony Elliott, because he was asked about that today, if the ACC should make some statement or rule about this with guys coming back from the NFL and playing college football now. And he was like it comes down to like adults are allowing it, and if adults are allowing it, then like it's so the problems with the adults, not the guys, the players, the student athletes coming back and doing it. It's just what a month of August, honestly. Last two things that I thought were interesting that Tony Elliott talked about today. Biggest recruiting weekend of Tony Elliott's tenure. And this is interesting because it's week 0. A lot of the other big college football, like the UNC TCU game, that's in Ireland. You're not having any recruiting visits over in Ireland. So like they're getting it. I think it's like what I thought I heard like triple digits, like amount of recruits coming in this weekend for this game against NC State, and they'll get some guys that maybe wouldn't have taken a visit in the past because they're like, oh well, I want to go here, I want to go there. Well, they don't have anywhere else to go this week, so why not go to Virginia playing NC State at home?
Right. And he said, more interest as the program showed what it was capable of last year. That's contributing to it as well. So coming off a historic 11 wins, there's just more interest in general. Combine it with it being week 0 and regionally, there just aren't a whole lot of other games, and certainly not marquee games where national television and all of that. So Yeah, big recruiting weekend. They only took 14, I think it was, high schoolers last year. So,
Yeah.
the transfer portal obviously affects people. 5 and 5 is going to affect people. The complicated math continues for Justin Sparrows and company. So, um, yeah, but it is a big recruiting weekend. You want them here so that the ones you do want, you can try to convince them to that this is the place for you.
It's a big opportunity just across the board. It's an opportunity to showcase to recruits, but also like to the country. Like you're playing a good team in NC State. You're also the only game on at 3:30 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon in on ESPN. And hopefully, Tony Elliott made reference to this. Hopefully, you get a sold out Scott Stadium. I know that's what we've been talking about for a couple months now. That's what Virginia's aiming for. And it feels like from some of the stuff I've heard, they're close. I don't know how close or what the numbers are. No, being a
There weren't
little,
a whole lot of seats available. Somebody posted about it on the message board. If you go click on the seat sites,
yeah,
there aren't a whole lot of choices. So there are not
no,
a whole lot of tickets available on the open marketplace. So I guess we'll see. It's going to be a lot of people there regardless. The students are
yeah,
going to show up for sure. And then I think there are a lot of people who have claimed tickets. Will they be there in those seats? That's always an open question, I guess. Particularly, we don't really know the weather until you get a couple days, so we'll see. But certainly a big game. I listened to you guys talk about it on your season preview episode. You all thought this was like one of the big games to circle. I'm going to bring it in smaller picture more. So instead of the country and the recruiting picture and all of that, your fan base. And this is something I've talked about a
yeah,
lot over the years. Why isn't Scott Stadium full? Why is it so hard to sell tickets? Because Virginia didn't win a whole lot for a long time. And sometimes when they've had the opportunity, this is an opportunity to give people a reason to come back, they've blown it. So one of the first Friday night lights games was Boise State, and they just didn't play well at all. I think that was the fancy carbon fiber helmets, if I
yeah,
remember right.
yeah.
Didn't play well at all. Um, the first game back after the tragedy, first home game, JMU ended up losing that game. No one holds that against them, but in terms of a lot of fans, they are excited to see something, and then what, right? After 2000, was it 2011 that Virginia made the good season under Mike London? When you get a big game or a big opportunity, what happens? 2007, the Virginia Tech game at the end, what happens, right? So all these big opportunity games, there's been too many over the last 2 decades where fans do show up, the product on the field doesn't win, and fans get frustrated, and maybe they don't come back for 6 games or 10 games, or they don't come back for 2 years or whatever because I've got a giant television, I can watch it there instead, right?
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity to show your fans that Scott Stadium is different, and it is. The Who Vision is way bigger. The blinking lights are different. The sound is better. I know that Wi-Fi is still a sticking point for fans, but there's all these fancy options that they've added for people who want that. They're doing the pregame concert for students with Shaquille O'Neal, DJ Diesel, right? So they're doing things that are different in terms of how Virginia feels on game day. Now you have to deliver on the field. And I would look at it from that opportunity as much as recruits and national television and all that jazz. Like the people in your own backyard are going to show up.
Yeah.
Let's give them a reason to come back for a game, 2 weeks later.
No, it's the ultimate showcase in all regards. So like it's crazy to have your week zero game be one of the more important games on your schedule, but for Virginia it is because like you mentioned, they have not seized that momentum in the past when they've had it. And no better opportunity than week zero against NC State. Last thing, and I just thought it was interesting, and talking to the Hall of Famer David Teal afterwards because he asked this question. Tony Elliott said that he voted for Virginia to be 19th in the preseason coaches poll. They got a couple votes in the preseason coaches poll. They got one vote exactly in the preseason AP poll. And I think there's some people around here that cover this team. And it's like it's a little surprising. I wasn't surprised because I still feel like we're expecting, people are like, all right, show us that you could do it again, which is what I've been saying. It's what I said on the season preview podcast. But it was interesting to hear Tony Elliott just kind of come out and say, like, because he's been tooting his horn all preseason, this roster's horn, like he believes in the potential that this team has. So to put them inside the top 20 before the season starts kind of is an indication of that. Also, I don't know many other coaches that reveal where they had their own teams ranked in the preseason.
He wasn't even sure though. He's like, where did we put him?
Yeah.
I think we put us 19th, right? So that tells you how much coaches uh have awareness of that coach's poll. It's not always just the head coach making
Yeah.
that decision and that vote, because Lord knows they've got other stuff going on
Yeah.
during football season, and they're not watching other teams play. They all say it. No, I haven't watched that team. I was watching my own team's film. And it's always weird to have a poll where you can vote on your own team.
Yeah.
Like, because you want to be fair, but you also want to hype your guys, right? You want to vote for your
Yeah.
team. I don't know. It's one of those weird things. So 19th seemed fair to me. I don't know.
I
They're in the top 35 of most way too earlys and
yeah.
AP and coaches. That seems about right. Top third of the
Yeah.
country.
No, that's what I
A lot of new,
expected.
yeah, a
But
lot of new faces, whatever.
I understand some people that would say that maybe they should be a little bit higher up. But I think like if you're Tony Elliott, like saying you put your team number 19 is like the perfect sweet spot. Like it shows that you believe in them to be a top 25 team, but like I don't believe in you that much. Like go show me that you could be better than number 19 in the country. And so like I think there's some like gamesmanship, some mind stuff here, some mindset stuff here for this Virginia team. But any other takeaways from Tony Elliott's press conference before we get into our conversation with Noah Fleischman?
I think the offensive line I keep going back to, and it's not because of the 165 starts the projected guys starting have. It's that there's a different name in every spot that's a backup. And you
Yeah,
referenced that a few minutes ago, how it used to be, well, like this guy's the starting tackle and he's the backup guard on. So you remember those old depth charts where Jack Whitmer would be in multiple spots and
yep.
Josie would be in multiple spots? There's a different name in every single one of these spots. And I think that's a sign of having some confidence that, hey, like we've got more than just these five guys. We've got some others who can serviceably play. Obviously, Ben York and John Adair have been in games as the extra offensive lineman on some of those packages. So yeah, I think that part sticks out to me more than anything else about the press conference and the depth chart and everything else.
And Alex Payne, the transfer they got from USC, is listed as the third guy at left tackle. Mikhail Boley was on my podcast earlier this week and said that he was one of the most impressive backup guys, one of the most impressive offensive linemen they've had in camp. So that's depth right there when you've got that guy at least listed as your third guy. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets in there as like that's six offensive linemen if they use some of those packages this year. But Kris, appreciate it. We will see you at Scott Stadium this Saturday, and we'll see my next guest, Noah Fleischman from the Wolfpacker, coming up after the break. Welcome back into the Who's On podcast. Game week 0 is finally here, and we've got this game that has gone through a lot of different iterations over the period of time. But I've got the Wolfpackers, Noah Fleischman joining me here, part of the On3 Network, to preview this game, get a little bit of the NC State perspective on here too. I know we just kind of broke down the latest for UVA with the initial depth chart and the Tony Elliott's press conference, but diving a little bit more into this game-specific matchups. Noah, thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So well, let's start with this game has gone through from being a non-ACC game, then like the league grows to 9 teams, then it was in Brazil for a large period of time. Now it's in Charlottesville. It's still an ACC game. I see a lot of people still saying it's a non-ACC game. Like I'm like, where have you been? Like you're like 5 iterations behind where this game is now.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, this game was scheduled a while ago as a non-ACC game, but yes, league game actually matters. If last year's game was a league game, NC State would have really taken that. They played one of their better games of the year to close that one out, but they didn't. But it is what it is, and now they're playing a team that had 11 wins a year ago, and they're excited to do it.
I'm hoping that there's some kind of Brazilian theme menu in the press box at Scott Stadium on Saturday. I feel like we needed some of that Brazilian flavor in there.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to make a 3-hour drive to Charlottesville rather than a who knows how long of a flight that would have been down to Brazil. So I'm sure both teams are excited. They didn't have to get on a international, cross continental, I don't know, whatever you would call it, continental flight between the United States and Brazil. They probably would have been doing that, Wednesday, probably Thursday, who knows?
Yeah, I don't even know if we would have heard from them this week, honestly. All right, but let's get into this game now. Let's take a pulse of things first. Dave Doeren's heading into year 14 at NC State. I kind of made the comparison on a recent podcast interview that I did that Dave Doeren's kind of like the Brad Brownell of ACC football, just the longevity piece, but also just like the all right, he's winning, but like, is he winning enough? Are we taking that step? And like Brownell got that Elite Eight run in there a few years ago, and so he kind of got that monkey off his back. Feels like for Doeren, he needs that like 10-win season to kind of get the monkey off his back. But how are Wolfpack fans feeling heading into his 14th year there?
Yeah, I think that's a really good comparison because both of those coaches do a lot more with what they have compared to their peers, right? Clemson basketball doesn't have a lot of money. NC State football, compared to a Miami or SMU, does not have a lot of money, but people want them to win 10, 11 games a year. It's kind of hard to do both. But, overall, this is a guy who's won, 8 or 9 games, I think 8 of his first 13 seasons at NC State. Like, that's good. Like, if when you're in the middle of the spending category, even probably toward the bottom of that in the ACC, and you're winning 8 or 9 games a year, it's a good thing. NC State fans do, as you say, want him to break through. There's a weird side of the coin on that because they experienced that in basketball where they broke through, made it, won the ACC title, made it to the Final Four with Kevin Keats. He was fired the next year. Like, and I've asked people that before. Like, do you want football to be like that, where you break through, win an ACC title, and then go 3-9 the next year? And a lot of people have told me yes, which I think is just, a crazy statement to say. But I think they've gotten used to 8 or 9 wins, which is good for most teams. They want him to break through. He had a chance to do it in the Pop-Tarts Bowl in 2023, lost to Kansas State. They had a chance to do it in the Holiday Bowl the year before, but UCLA got COVID. So he's had opportunities, hasn't been able to break through, and now this year, with what their schedule looks like ahead of them, this probably is the best case scenario for him to do it, with that and the quarterback he's got back.
Yeah, I think for Virginia for such a long period of time, like they would kill to have consistent 7, 8, 9 win seasons over a long period of time. And like last year was great, but the thing that everyone keeps talking about with Virginia this year, and I was talking to a couple of people about this, about why maybe there's not more excitement about this Virginia team, outside of Charlottesville, is because, well, they did it one year and they did it against an easier schedule and they haven't proven it over the duration. And so like that's what Virginia is kind of striving for this year. NC State's done the consistency thing. They're just looking for that one big year like Virginia had. And I think that maybe both fan bases would just like to trade a little bit of that experience right now. Like let Virginia have like a good 8, 9 win season. I know Virginia fans are going to want more than that, but if you could just get that over a long span of time, like there's no like that does so much for your program. One of the big differences between these two teams, and we're going to talk about a lot of the question marks about both sides and some of the people that they've lost in the offseason, but NC State brings back a guy at quarterback and CJ Bailey, who is one of the best quarterbacks in the conference for sure. And we'll see what he does. A lot of teams came ringing his doorbell this offseason, and he decided to stay put there in Raleigh. And unlike some other quarterbacks in the Triangle area, didn't move on. Where do you think about CJ Bailey, where he's heading into this year after kind of what he showed last year?
Yeah, last year was big for him because you go back to his freshman year, he gets thrown into the fire kind of just on a whim when Grayson McCall gets, a pair of concussions and ends his career. So he started 9 games his freshman year, and they weren't expecting a lot from him then because he was kind of just drinking from a fire hose. His first start was on the road at Clemson. Didn't go well, but they were expecting that. Last year, though, he had a full offseason to prepare to be the guy, and he showed improvement. I mean, threw for over 3,000 yards, 25 passing touchdowns, only 9 interceptions, ran for 6 more touchdowns. So he did what he needs to do. And now they're hoping that he can carry that momentum forward. He had a good offseason. He's the captain of this team, or one of 5, but he's the one they look to. He's got to control the offense. They've given him freedom to do whatever he wants at the line of scrimmage. He can check a play. He can move the protection. Like, there's a lot different CJ Bailey, I think, than UVA saw a year ago. And I think it's going to be really exciting to see what he does against a veteran team like Virginia. But overall, he's taken a lot of steps in the positive direction. As you said, teams did come calling. He never went into the portal, but in this day of age, they're going to call you and ask what you're interested in. And yes, he didn't leave. I'm sure if Darian Mensah didn't go to Miami, there was a chance he ends up in Miami, being from the area and having connections down there. But NC State held on to him, and they're excited to have a guy in his third year starting.
Yeah, I think that Virginia fans last year, the play that everyone remembers from this perspective is the rollout where Landon Danley, who was backup linebacker playing in place of Cam Robinson, had him dead to rights for a sack, took a terrible angle, and CJ Bailey goes in for, an untouched, like 20 plus yard touchdown run. It was like the easiest thing ever. And you're like, what would have been if Cam Robinson was out there? But yeah, I think over the course of the season, like he showed some really impressive stuff and he's got like such a good profile. And it seems like he's had a good summer too. So, like, obviously, like, number one on the depth chart and number one on your like your planning, your scouting report is CJ Bailey right now, and that's what it seemed like with Tony Elliott, who said he's got like a high, Dave Doeren's got a Heisman hopeful, so he doesn't think he needs to change too much in kind of what they're doing up there in Raleigh. What do you think makes him so difficult to defend? And then I also want to ask you, just kind of, where would you rank him among ACC quarterbacks right now? Because I kind of have like a tier of like five guys that I think are at the top, and then like there's a bunch of like guys kind of in that middle that are kind of competing, and I think that's kind of where Bo Perbula is. But the five guys up at the top, Mensa, Bailey, JKS at Cal, Mason Heinschel, and then Kevin Jennings. That's the one I always forget, but Kevin Jennings definitely is up there too.
Yeah, I think when you rank quarterbacks in the ACC, I'd put him third. I'd put him behind Mensa and JKS at Cal. He has a chance to pass JKS. I don't think he'll get to the level of Darren Mensa this year. If he did, then NC State has a really good year coming for him. But yeah, this is a guy 6'6", 218. He can make all the throws. He put on good weight this summer. He's just so tall. It looks like he's really skinny, but he's
Yeah.
added, 20 pounds of muscle since showing up on campus, maybe even more. Dave Doeren likes to say he was 180 pounds. I think he was a little bit heavier than that when he showed up. But he can make the throws. He can run. He's not going to run like a Lamar Jackson, but if you give him the opportunity, he's going to take off and go. Virginia saw that, as you said, last year. So he can do it all. It's just a matter of being consistent, right? We've seen flashes of him being really, really, really good. We've seen flashes of him being really, really bad. And like at Miami, for example, a year ago, he threw for 120 yards and had multiple interceptions. At Pitt, threw multiple interceptions. Like that's his one thing is he doesn't turn the ball over a lot, but when he does, it doesn't end well for NC State. So that's the biggest thing that they're looking for him is show up in big games. And for him, it starts in week 0.
I want to go back to that game last year between Virginia and NC State because, gosh, that was like a track meet for much of the game. Both of these defenses were like still just figuring things out. It was so early in the season. Like I remember that was kind of the first taste that Virginia fans got like, oh, this secondary has got a long way to go, and just kind of communicating. And like they got there in the second half of the season because like it's so funny. Like the season just flipped. Like they went from a really good offensive team with a defense that was struggling, and then all of a sudden they flipped and like they could barely score, but the defense was awesome. NC State, I know they had some defensive issue, and we'll talk about the defense later, but it felt like they had a lot of good pieces offensively. Hollywood Smothers, who's now gone. Where are they set up around CJ Bailey this year? Duke Scott's a guy that really came on towards the end of last year. He was a really good player, running back. But what are the other pieces like?
Yeah, on paper, their transfer portal departures looks like the offense fell apart. You lose Hollywood Smothers, who is at Texas now. He's going to be their lead back for Arch Manning. They lost their top two receivers that had eligibility left. Terrell Anderson went to Southern California. Noah Rogers goes to Alabama. You lose your starting left tackle to South Carolina. So a lot of it just falls apart. But in reality is they're okay. They're fine. And Duke Scott, as you mentioned, this is a guy who he had made 2 starts last year. Both starts went for over 100 yards, including a win over, then top 10 Georgia Tech. So that's not a problem. They're going to really lean on him, as well as North Carolina transfer Davion Goss, who grew up with CJ Bailey, as it's become a common theme when we talk about guys they've added to their roster and growing up with CJ. But the backfield's fine. They're really happy with what happened there. Obviously, they'd want to have Hollywood back. He's an NFL caliber player, but it didn't work out. At receiver, this is a team that replaced a lot, right? Their top 5 pass catchers from a year ago are gone. 4 of them either out of eligibility in the NFL or at a different team. One of them, another player, Teddy Hoffman, who played really, really well at the beginning of the year last year as a true freshman. He's suspended for the whole year by the NCAA. So not the best case scenario in the world, but they go in, they add 9 receivers to this team, 5 through the portal, 4 freshmen. And this is a team that plays a lot of receivers. It doesn't have a dominant receiver like, maybe other teams do around the country. So that's not a big worry. It's more of just a fact of how do they gel right away, right? And NC State added a guy like JoJo Trader from Miami, who also grew up with CJ Bailey, playing since they're 8 years old. And he's going to be a guy they lean on a lot. So the pass game, I don't think they're too worried about it because they play a lot of guys. They'll rotate 7 receivers in a game. So it's going to be more of just who steps up rather than is there a guy for him to throw to.
I think that the situation you laid out with the receivers is exactly where Virginia finds themselves with the receivers right now. Like they think they have guys in there, but it's probably not going to be like this is definitely the guy. It's probably going to be a mix. In I look at the depth chart we just talked about earlier in the podcast, but they list Rico Flores and Tyler Coleman both at wide receiver, Cam Courtney and Jaquan Gibson at wide receiver. Deshaun Martin's another guy that's going to get playing time. So like they've got a ton of wide receivers in the mix that are probably going to swap in and out. But time will tell if like you're saying, like some of those guys really kind of, come to the occasion. Offensive line wise, Virginia obviously very familiar with Garrett Tujague running the offensive line down there at NC State. Where is that group heading into this year?
Yeah, they returned their right tackle and Teague Anderson. Their center is Spike Souls, who played a lot at right guard as a true freshman last year, so they're fine with those two guys. At left tackle, they brought in East Carolina transfer Jermaine McCrimmon. He was a first-team American selection a year ago. They believe he's got a higher ceiling than Jacarius Peak, who was a top five transfer that was in the portal throughout the whole offseason. So that's exciting. It comes down to the two guard spots. They had an open competition between three or four players. Yusuf Mugarbil won the left guard battle. This is a guy who he made his first career start against Virginia last year. He'll be in his sixth year of college football this year. He's had a really interesting career. Started at Florida, got in a accident on a motorized scooter. It really derailed his whole career until last year, and now he's really hitting his stride. And at right guard, they're going to start Kamen Smith, who made six starts last year. I believe he did start against Virginia as well in the Lions. So they've got a group that they're excited with. The two tackles are experienced. The center's a high upside player, and the guard spots are kind of, if you're going to look for a weak link in the offensive line, it's there, but they're really excited with the development they've made over the last, 12 months.
All right, I'm going to put us both on the spot here. I want this is something new I'm going to try out this year with game previews. I'll let you make the case for why NC State has the advantage over UVA defense, and I'll make the other case. But we'll start with you. Why do you think NC State could have a good day against this UVA defense?
Comes down to CJ Bailey. I think that's going to be this whole season for NC
Makes
State
sense.
is can your guy be the guy? And that's what they're hoping for. And it really comes down to can he do it? He hasn't really shown up in big games yet in his career on a consistent level. He did against Georgia Tech, which I think is a good example. NC State was the underdog going in. It was a home game at night. But against a top 10 undefeated team, he showed up, made the plays he needed to. They won the game. They lead on the running game a lot too. I expect the same at UVA. So if this offense has a good day and they put up points, it's CJ Bailey doesn't hurt himself. He makes the right plays, and they get out of there okay.
CJ Bailey could be the best quarterback Virginia faces on the schedule all year. They've got JKS later on against Cal, and they've got Kevin Jennings on the road at SMU. So we'll see. But you could be facing the best quarterback on your schedule right off the bat in game week one. Luckily, though, and why I make the case for Virginia is because last year I mentioned some of the issues in communication that they had with the secondary. A lot of that came down to those guys didn't play with each other until like a couple weeks into the season almost. Like they were shuffling guys in, had a ton of injuries. They've had the same secondary guys since spring ball. So a lot of those guys are familiar. I think that the secondary is kind of getting overlooked. As people ask me, what's the strongest position group? Is it linebacker because of Cam Robinson? Is it defensive line because you got some guys coming back there? I said it's secondary because I think they have some really good talent in there. Brandon Hillman coming in from Michigan was an all Big Ten guy. Ethan Minter coming back. Jacoby Henderson is a guy that kind of gets looked over because he was on a terrible Rutgers defense last year, but he was actually pretty good if you look at the numbers. And Emilio Agard has been one of the standouts of fall camp. So I'm actually very high on this defense. The biggest question is, can you get the pressure on CJ Bailey? A big thing that they've been talking about all fall camp is creating more turnovers. Can you have one of those days against CJ Bailey where you get him to make some of those mistakes? That's going to be the big thing. And honestly, the biggest question for Virginia anytime on that defense is Cam Robinson out on the field. If he's gone on the field, you feel pretty good about whatever the matchup is. We'll shift to the other side now, go to the NC State defense. So last year, they ranked 14th in total yards in the ACC, 12th in scoring. What's different for this Wolfpack defense?
Yeah, they're going to year two of a new defensive scheme under DJ Elliott. Tony Gibson ran a 3-3-5 at NC State forever before he left to take the job at Marshall. DJ Elliott more runs it depends on the front. Sometimes it's like a 4-2-5, sometimes it's a 3-4. It depends on where he's moving an outside linebacker to play. But they didn't have really the personnel to really do what he wanted to do a year ago. It's kind of, 60, 70% of the way there. This year, they feel like they've got everyone they need to make it work. The problem is he's never had a defense inside the top 80 in the FBS. So that's going to be where it comes down to is can he have, this late career, middle career jump in defensive, output? We'll find out. But they did add enough portal pieces. I believe we're going to have 5 transfers probably in their starting defensive lineup this year. So that'll just tell you kind of where they flipped the roster and how they tried to make the most of last year, which was okay at times and at times was just a disaster.
Yeah. Give me some names. Who are some people that we should, because I was going through like, all right, who's back? And I was like, there's like one or two guys, but I don't recognize most of the guys back.
Yeah, when you look at the returners, I think the best returner on defense you're going to look at is Brian Nelson at corner. He transferred in last year from North Texas. He was, one of the American better, one of the Americans better defensive backs in 2024. He had an okay year last year, 29 tackles, 6 passes defended. He's looking to step it up, and he has. He's a lot more confident this year in practice. So they expect him to have a lot more production. Newcomers, though, they're all over the defense. You look at linebacker, Popo Aguirre, he's coming in from Miami. This is a guy who would have been in a starting role at Miami this year, but they had Mohamed Toure get a 7th year of eligibility. So
Eighth year, I think.
yes, something like that. He's there forever. So he had to leave to go get a starting spot. Ended up with his younger brother at NC State. So he's going to be a big part of this. He's the only transfer to be named captain this year. So it speaks a lot about what he can do at linebacker. King Mack comes in from Penn State, also played at Alabama at safety. They're really excited about those two guys, both veteran players that can make a lot of plays. And on the edge, Harvey Dyson, this is a guy who led the American in sacks a year ago with 8. He had a strip sack against Ole Miss in the college football playoff. Like, he's the guy that they want to get after the quarterback, and that's where they struggled last year. This is a defense that's designed to create pressure in sacks, and it didn't do that last year, and they're trying to fix it. They bring in a guy who is a proven commodity at getting to the backfield, and Bo Prabula is going to be on his sights here in week 0.
Yeah. All right, let's do it again. You make the case for the NC State defense against this Virginia offense, and I'll do the opposite. I'll let you go first again.
It's going to come down to this defensive line, I think. I mean, Virginia has the most experienced offensive line NC State probably see all year. The good thing for NC State is its veteran nose guard in Katron Evans is currently in a legal battle for his eligibility, but he is eligible to play this weekend. They don't know about the other 11 games, but they know he can play this weekend. I think that's a big lift for them because behind him is 2 sophomores and a true freshman at nose guard. So having a guy in his 6th year of eligibility out there against that offensive line is going to be pretty big, but it's going to come down to that line stopping the run, making Bo Prabula beat him through the air. Because I think if that's the case, I think they like their chances of making him air it out just based on how his year at Mizzou went, toward the end of the year last year.
Yeah, I think you hit right on it. It's not only the most experienced offensive line NC State will face. It's probably just flat out the most experienced offensive line in the country if Virginia's coming back. I'm looking at the depth chart right here, and it's a 7th year guy in Monroe Mills, a 6th year guy in McKeelan Thomas, a 7th year guy in Drake Metcalf, 6th year in Noah Josie, and 5th year in Mikhail Boley. Boley and Josie have lined up on the left side of that UVA offensive line for 5 years now next to each other. So a lot of continuity there on that side. And you've got some really talented guys throughout the rest of the group. And like I keep repeating it, but like the offensive line is like a governor for your offense. If you got a good one, you can let it rip. If you got a bad one, then you got a lot of issues. So it kind of all starts there. And the big question for this team, and a lot of people will focus on the wide receivers, but it's just what does Bo Prabula look like? What kind of quarterback are you getting out of him? I still don't think we've seen like the real Bo Prabula. I'm very skeptical of that Missouri situation last year. They had a great running game, but that offensive line struggled against pass protection. This UVA offensive line obviously set up well to do that. I think that Virginia has the pieces, and they are so high on Jaquel Middlebrook, the running back transfer from Middle Tennessee, that maybe it's some of those drives that Virginia had last year where they just run the ball 10, 11, 12 times in a row, and they get to the end zone eventually, and they just do it a little bit slower. But if you can control the clock, which I think this team's set up to do, I like it. And then you're allowing Bo Prabula to throw into maybe some less crowded windows on like some play action and stuff. So I'm cautiously optimistic about the offense. I'm still just like, what is it going to look like when we get out there? Which I think we're all kind of in that point here in week 0 of the season. Noah, how crucial do you think this game is for either side heading into this. We talked like last year that was a non-ACC game, so like a lot of people were like, "This is the most important game of the Tony Elliott era." Well, they lost it. They still won 11 games and went to an ACC title game. So was it that important? I think this year very different because it's a conference game and it kicks off the whole season.
Yeah, I think it might be one of the most important games of the year for both teams. I mean, you look at both teams' schedules. I mean, preseason schedule rankings are kind of, pointless because nobody's played a game. It's based off last year. But NC State and Virginia have the two easiest schedules in the FBS, 67th and 68th. Virginia being the 67, NC State being 68. So whoever wins this game has a pretty clear path at finding their way to Charlotte at the end of December. Of course, you have to take care of business in the other games you play in league, but it sets the tone for not only that, but just the tone for your season. You go out there and lay an egg against conference opponent on a nice day, hopefully in Charlottesville. Like that might not do well for you, and if you go out there and you win, that'll do a lot of wonders for you. So I think it comes down to that. It's going to set the tone for both teams, and whoever wins is going to be in the driver's seat to really make some noise in the league.
I'm just so glad it's not in Brazil because like this is such a good matchup. Like you want people to be there. Like I like AC. Like I'm fine if UNC wants to go play TCU over in Ireland or if they want to play somewhere else. But like don't put like a good ACC conference matchup like this when we have so much like there's too many teams in the league now. So we get some real dud games every week in the ACC. Don't put a good one like this overseas. All right, Virginia. 5.5 point favorite heading into this one. I have an inkling of where you might go with this, but what is your pick for Saturday?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing. I think it could turn into a shootout. Who knows? I mean, really, it comes down to the defenses. I think both teams have an offense they believe in. But I could see NC State going in there and winning this game. One, they did it a year ago at home. They took care of business. Yes, they needed, a interception at the end that wasn't a great throw, but at the same time, this is a team that wins games. Second of all, Dave Doeren, we mentioned Mr. Consistency. He's 4-0 all time against UVA. He did
Yep.
need a walk-off field goal in 2023 that was a retry on a penalty. Like he's gotten really lucky against UVA the last two times, but at the same time, this is a guy that knows how to win and knows how to win against the Cavaliers. So we'll see what happens. But it would not surprise me to see NC State not only cover that spread, but to see him go in there and start off 1-0.
I'm glad you brought up that other game too, because we talked so much about last year's game because it's right there. But that first game, that was such you had the whole Brendan Armstrong side of it. You had, you mentioned that field goal. I believe I might be wrong, but someone correct me. I think it was Cam Robinson that had that penalty that allowed them to retake that field goal to win the game. I was off that year from football coverage, so I saw that one just from the stands like anyone else. But yeah, that was such a crazy game. So yeah, these last two games between Dave Doeren and Tony Elliott have been very interesting games. I think we'll get something, maybe not a retried field goal, but it's a pretty close game. But I will go with Virginia. I just think the experience that this team has, they are just built to win close competitive games like this. And I think especially at home, I know there's a lot of conjecture and talk about the crowd at Scott Stadium. We're hearing promising things. We'll see when we get there. It's still early in the week for me to make a call on that, but I think it'll be a really good atmosphere, and I like the experience that this team has on the offense and the defense. We'll see what Cam Robinson's status is, but I think they're better suited if he doesn't play to play without him. Obviously, you want your best player out on the field if you can have him, but yeah, I'll go Virginia. Like field goal or a touchdown. Like I know that's like that defeats the whole point of the 5.5 point spread there, but I'll go a touchdown just to be safe. But Noah, looking forward to seeing you up in Charlottesville. Looking forward to you. You don't need a passport. You just walk right in. No passport. You can park and walk right into the stadium.
It's a lot short of a drive to go from Raleigh to Charlottesville. I don't know if I want to drive to Rio. So luckily we don't have to find out. We can just make the short drive up.
No, I appreciate it, man. All right, that'll do it. Thank you to Kris Wright from the Sabre and also to Noah for the Wolfpacker. Go check out his stuff as we get ready for game day on Saturday. Opening game of the season, week 0. You got to love it. Football is back. All right, hit the bell icon, subscribe to the Who's On podcast on YouTube, follow, subscribe, and leave some 5-star reviews on Apple and Spotify, and we will see you after the first game of the season next week. See ya.